Hello, you're all very welcome to our webinar on mental health recovery. Does setting goals help? My name is Cillian and I am the Peer Education Training and Development Officer with Midwest ARIES, and we're just waiting for a few attendees to join there. So I'm joined by a great panel this afternoon and I'm really looking forward to the discussion. This is a partnership with Mental Health Ireland, and just as always, a big thank you to Mental Health Ireland for the ongoing partnership throughout the last, I suppose, 2 years, since we have a range of different topics on different webinars as well throughout those years. So it's great to have that ongoing support. So today's format of the webinar is about 1 hour. We'll have plenty of time for discussion. I'll explain that in a second, how to input questions into the Q&A button. But I'll just explain a little bit about Midwest ARIES if this is your first time attending one of our webinars. So we're Midwest ARIES Recovery Education Service, and we do workshops online, face-to-face, across the Midwest, so Clare, Limerick, and North Tipperary. This webinar is also recorded, so it will be up on our YouTube channel and our podcast as well, called The Wellness Panel. So you will be able to watch the replay of it or forward on to people who might get interested in watching this webinar after. Just as well, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen if you're watching on your phone, iPad, or laptop. If you want to preload questions into the Q&A button at the moment and before we start, or even throughout the webinar, we'll hopefully be able to answer all the questions throughout. So obviously this webinar is on mental health recovery. Does setting goals help? And I think it's a very topical subject around this time of year, especially after January, hitting the new year as well. Some people really strive about setting goals or setting New Year's resolutions, and some people find it hard setting goals. They might have a barrier against it as well. So we'll have a good conversation around that as well. So hopefully you'll be able to enjoy the whole webinar throughout the next hour. I think I've covered everything, so I'm just going to invite the panelists to turn on their cameras and we'll introduce ourselves as well. So welcome Thomas, Gina, Mike, and Sarah. Thanks for joining today on the webinar. We might just do a round of introductions first, just who you are, and I suppose just a little bit about yourself as well, if that's okay. So Mike, I might go to yourself first, if that's all right.
Perfect. Thanks, Cillian. My name is Mike O'Neill. I'm the manager of Midwest ARIES, and as Cillian said, we're the recovery education service here in the Midwest. Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks, Mike. Great to have you here. Thomas, I'll go to yourself next.
Hi, Cillian. Hi, everybody. My name is Thomas, and I'm a recovery education facilitator with Midwest ARIES. Thanks, Cillian.
Great. Thanks, Thomas. Great to have you here. Gina, might go to yourself next.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Gina Delaney. I'm a development officer at Mental Health Ireland. Also trained there during the pandemic in mental health and wellbeing coaching, and have experience as a family member, and also my own challenges in life.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gina. Great to have you here as well. And Sarah, just yourself, please. Thank you.
Hi, Cillian. Delighted to be here. My name is Sarah Danagher, and I am a nurse. I work in the Limerick Mental Health Services, and I am part of a team that looks after the recovery and wellbeing department in the Acute Psychiatric unit here in the University Hospital Limerick.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Sarah. Great to have you here as well. So I suppose we'll kick off with the first question. So obviously the topic is on mental health recovery. Does setting goals help? So the first question I'm going to throw out to the panel is, what is a recovery goal in mental health? So Sarah, I might come to yourself first, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I was giving some thought to, particularly last night in preparation for today. What is a recovery goal in mental health? And I suppose really, I feel it's about something that, relates directly to, I suppose, our own mental health goals in life and what helps us to stay well, but also things that maybe might have fallen by the wayside if we've been through any challenges, and things that we might want to, circle back on and think, what was important to me in the past? Is this something that I, still value or still believe in, something that I want for myself? So it can be, I suppose, an opportunity to reflect on, things that we might have maybe dropped for a while for lots of different reasons, maybe a few bumps in the road, or, other things that have needed to be prioritized in life. And or maybe because, you know, we've experienced mental health challenges ourselves, that we have lost sight of maybe what our goals are. So I suppose really it's about, for me, it's very much about, you know, reestablishing or revisiting and reflecting on, you know, what was important, what's important to me, what would I like to achieve for myself, and is there, you know, what areas of my life would I like to build on, things that maybe I had before or I had achieved before that I might want to revisit, or it might be something new. But ultimately, I suppose it's about really focusing on what is uniquely important to you. And I think that really, I suppose, requires a lot of reflection and kind of personal consideration about what I, you know, what the person, or if in terms of myself, what I might value most for me in my life. So I think it's a very unique and kind of personal thing. It's very different for everybody. So what one person might consider a goal for them might be completely different for somebody else. So it's yeah, I think it's really about reflecting on what your own personal needs are, and giving that time to yourself, trying to focus on that area of your life.
That's brilliant, Sarah. And I like what you kind of mentioned there about the goals are unique to us, that we don't have to do what other people are doing at different stages or following other goals people might have. And I like what you're saying, like you're constantly assessing and reassessing all the time. Goals can change as well. So that's really good. So does anyone have any thoughts on what Sarah was mentioning, or even on the question itself? What is a recovery goal in mental health? Does anyone want to come in there? Mike,
Yeah,
you're
sure.
unmuted. Thank you.
Yeah. And again, I think, yeah, I think Sarah is correct in that it's unique to each individual, because in some ways it's a bit like, you know, I often hear people, you know, as we work in the mental health service in the Midwest, where they talk about, I suppose, the impact of receiving a diagnosis, you know, and how that can impinge on a person's sense of their identity, and they're kind of at a loss what to do. But it's almost that, and that in itself can create the crisis. And I suppose sometimes it's, you know, a goal for me, I suppose, when I was given my first diagnosis, and that was about 20 years ago, I was actually thrilled, because it made sense. Because for me, if I was given a diagnosis, well, therefore now, whatever was going on for me made sense. Therefore, there must be treatment, and therefore I can get well, you know. And so that was the communication in my head of what that. So my goal immediately was, it doesn't have to be like this. I can get to where I want to be with that support. Now, as I said, that might sound like a simple answer, but in reality, as we all know, when it comes to mental health, there's nothing easy about it. You know, and I suppose then for other people, like a goal maybe, you know, getting a job, getting a place to live, you know, having a relationship, you know, having an activity, doing something you enjoy. It would be, you know, strengths-based stuff. And it could be anything, absolutely anything. You know, so I suppose when we look at goals, yeah, they're unique to the individual, as Sarah said. Yeah. Thanks, Cillian.
Lovely. Thanks, Mike. Anyone else, Thomas or Gina, on Mike, what Mike has said, or Sarah, any thoughts on
Yeah.
what's mentioned?
I'm glad that you didn't go to us one by one, because when Sarah was talking, I thought, oh no, I couldn't say it better. And the same with Mike, I suppose. Yeah, like, so I would be in agreement with everything that has been said. And what helps me when I'm thinking about goals or setting goals is I kind of I'm a visual person, so I kind of think about, like, you know, the circle, and then I kind of think about like a healing space or a growth space, like, you know, so like, you know, recovery then being the healing, and discovery then being the growth, like, you know, and we can be in both, like, so they can overlap, you know, and we can be in a healing space and in a growth space at the same time. Because sometimes I know in my life I've thought, well, I have too much healing to do. I can't think about maybe setting a goal in something, because I need to be healed and fixed before I can, you know, think about planning or doing or stepping into another space. But then I suppose I learned through, you know, reading or talking or therapy or education that no, actually, you know, where you are right now is good enough. Like, you know, you can always, you know, continue, I suppose, to recover. But you can always as well be in that space of discovery and open to the future, and, you know, creating a space for that as well.
Brilliant, Gina. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. Thomas, we might come to yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Cillian. When I read the question, it was personal recovery goal in mental health. And I don't think it's just limited to people with mental health conditions. I think it can be applied to anybody, because everybody, you know, can have setbacks, or they can have their own goals that they want to focus on. So, you know, when we do this, we do a workshop in the acute units called personal recovery goals. And, you know, we ask them what are their recovery goals. So in order to explain the question, I kind of say that it's kind of like the vision of your life. What do you want from your life? It doesn't have to be specifically recovery. It can be anything, you know. And I also agree with Mike and Sarah that it's all very personal, and it's all individual to yourself. Thanks, Cillian.
Lovely. Thanks, Thomas. Any additional thoughts? Or are we happy to move? Yeah, go on ahead,
I
Mike.
think kind of just joining the dots a little bit, and I like what Gina said, because I could identify what she was saying in that, like, because even right now, I'm still in, there's stuff in the healing space for me right now. And I think, but even when I was very unwell, I could still, even with, if there was chaos, but among the chaos, maybe there was one aspect of my life, you could say it was, that's still highly functioning. Which kind of, it sounds bizarre. So in that way, when you're having that discovery, the healing, so it's not that you're sitting to heal first and then wait for the rest to happen. Whereas like it would be unusual where somebody is in such a bad place that they're just like not functioning at all, you know, because some people might still have something that they enjoy, a hobby, you know, or a good friend that they can meet for coffee, and having that connection, you know, so that ability to even maintain a stable friendship, you know. So these are the things that, you know, I suppose if you were to break down your life, what does a healthy life look like? I mentioned the circle, but even into, you know, a pie chart, you know, yeah, like, yeah, I think that's really good, you know, because I know myself, I was a basket case in some cases, for the want of a better phrase, but that's how unwell I was. But yet, I still had stability and was functioning in other areas. Yeah, interesting.
That's good,
yeah.
Mike. Yeah, and you just touched on what Gina was saying as well. Like, so if you're maybe, like, for example, the person was in a low state, there still is opportunities for maybe one goal or something, or there is still, you can still strive for some sort of something in life rather than trying to not do anything. Or is that what I'm kind of grasping from it? Like, you're trying to, you still
Yeah.
can achieve certain goals despite the
Oh,
setbacks or
yeah.
the struggles. Yeah, go on ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
kind of not to maybe rule out, like, you know, it's like, well, you know, maybe like, because, you know, we might have short-term and medium and long-term goals, like, you know, and like a long-term goal could be something that seems kind of maybe unattainable right now, but there are all, like, that doesn't mean though that I can't take steps towards it, because I might have, you know, maybe a loved one with an illness at the minute, and that's kind of maybe taken a lot of our family's energy and attention, like, you know, and that has to be the focus. And like, you know, I might have to protect myself and my own healing within that as well. But I can still have, I suppose, a dream at this point, because, you know, it's not, maybe it's not as strong as a goal right now, but it could be a dream, to maybe to publish a book, for example, and I can take small steps towards it, like, you know, so I could sign up for a course that would gain me more knowledge in the topic of interest, while also, you know, dealing with something at home, like, yeah.
That's really good, and thanks for explaining all that, Gene. That's really, really good. So it ties nicely into our next question, and it's how would one start about setting a goal or a recovery goal? So how would a person start, I suppose, is the question. So if anyone wants to come in, more than I want to go one by one. If anyone wants to, any thoughts on it, I'll leave it over to the floor. Gina?
I'll go talking
Go for
again.
it. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I think I love just starting off with a blank page, like, you know, just start with a blank page, and a pen or a pencil in your hand, and just kind of just free flow with what comes to mind, even if it's a picture or whatever, just of, like just anything that comes to mind. And it could be from the vastly ridiculous to the absolutely achievable within the next 5 minutes. And somewhere in the middle, you'll come up with something that excites you enough to want to strive for it, but is achievable enough that it won't put you off. So something that kind of strikes a balance somewhere. And already on that page, you could have short, medium, and long term, I suppose, things that you want to achieve. So I think just starting with a blank page and allowing yourself to dream, that's where I would start.
That's brilliant, Gina. I like it. And I like the way you break it down into short, medium, and long-term goals, because that is really important. Like, have a long away distant goal and then maybe a short goal that you can achieve in a week or 2 weeks or something. That's the key to it, and the smaller steps. Sarah, Thomas, or Mike, any additional thoughts on that or on the question? Sarah, you're going to come in there. Thank you.
Yeah, just absolutely. I think Neill and Gina really hit the nail on the head there, and just in terms of short-term and long-term goals. And I know, like, what you were saying earlier as well, Thomas, and the workshops that ARIES facilitate here in the APU. Sometimes it can be a little bit tricky for people to tease out, well, what are my goals, and trying to identify a short-term goal versus a long-term goal. And I suppose in some situations, and it's come up in some of those workshops, people have often said, in terms of recovering from a mental health challenge, especially when they're at the earlier stages of their recovery, it can very much seem that, goals or hopes or dreams that a person has can really feel out of reach or seem out of reach. So like Gina was saying, achieving smaller, maybe more measurable or a little bit maybe more realistic goals, and getting on top of those can really help, to generate momentum and kind of empower a person and give themselves that energy that mightn't be there. Actually, I managed to get these pieces done. I managed to accomplish those, and it kind of drives us on then to feel, well, actually maybe I can start working towards maybe the larger ones. So for an example, for somebody in the acute setting, it might be, we have a walking group once a week, and some people might feel a little bit overwhelmed by that, but their goal might be, actually, I'd like to go on that. So maybe their short-term goal or the immediate goal might be getting out of bed at a certain time, so that they can stay motivated and move towards that and get ready to maybe come on the walking group. And that might seem a very simplistic example, but that can very much be the reality. And sometimes I feel it's even on personal level, I can focus on the bigger picture all the time, whereas maybe if I focused on the smaller pieces of the puzzle, it would help me get there in a way that I feel that I can stay motivated and stay energized and stay focused. And yeah, I think that's definitely maybe one of the challenges that I come across myself, or that people have mentioned to me, would be, maybe setting that goal too big, and maybe just looking at the bigger picture, or the end goal can be tricky sometimes, and not to underestimate the little steps as well, can be really powerful to kind of maintaining and keeping focused. Yeah.
That's excellent, Sarah. And I think what kind of stood out to me is just not even celebrating, but just like the small victories that you can take each day that can have that compound ripple effect over time to get to that medium-term goal or short or long-term goal as well. So I really like what you're kind of saying there. Mike, you are unmuted. I'll leave it over to yourself.
And I think just following up on what Sarah was saying, and again in the hospital there, where you have people who obviously come in who are very unwell, and this was a real example, and it was a conversation around goals, and one man said, "Do you know what?" he said, "I'd love to have friends." And one of the people sitting at the table, and I can still see him, a man there, and he turned around to him and he says, "I'm your friend." And it was such a powerful thing, so when you look at, like, one of the components of recovery education is that peer learning. Well, here was somebody who responded as a human being and identified, we are already friends. And and it was so powerful. And another thing I always do, and I don't, since I'm in the management role, I don't get as many opportunities to go out and facilitate in the hospitals as much as I used to. And when we do our introductions at our recovery education workshop, one of the questions, or at the start of it, like we do introductions, so we allow people to bring their name to the room, have their voice heard, but we ask them to introduce themselves. And I always say, as an icebreaker, what strength, name one strength that you have. And this is an example of one of the things about how do you start a recovery goal, because it fits there. And I do this deliberately because it's almost inevitable that somebody sitting at that table who is so unwell, they will say, I can't think of one strength. And I always throw it out to the rest of the people in the room. Right, you've heard what John or Mary has said. They said, can anyone here identify a strength that they have? And inevitably, 2 or 3 people will identify their strengths. You're a great listener, you're really funny, you always make time for the chat for me when, we sit down. So, because sometimes when it comes to setting a goal, we're so beaten and broken, the absence of motivation and energy. But to hear other people, and sometimes you might have to rely on, how do you start? Maybe getting somebody to help. And like as Sarah said, there's something about that connection, even in the walking group. And as I always say, and it comes back to what Gina said, start small. And as I always said, look at, well, what do you actually enjoy before you even get the strengths? Because if you can find something, that you enjoy, and very often when I ask that question, someone will say, God, I can't think of anything that I enjoy. Well, can you think of something you really like doing in your childhood? And they might say, just, what, I love coloring. And I say, well, there's adult coloring books out there, and stuff like that, so you'll always find an in or a tap in, when you're trying to motivate somebody else. But for yourself, as I would say, reach out and ask if you have an idea, or start the conversation with yourself. I know Sarah mentioned, I'm not sure whether we're on here or prior to that even before she came on, it was, I did a bit of reflection last night on what I was going to bring to this today. So in some ways, as Gina, looked at it differently, and sometimes, so as in, draw it out, freestyle, that kind of free writing or free coloring or free doodling, but sometimes people might need to reflect and think about it as well. Anyway, thanks, Cillian.
Lovely. Thanks, Mike. Any thoughts on the question, or any additional thoughts from what was mentioned so far? Are we happy to move?
Yeah,
Thomas, you?
Can I add?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like from doing this work, I came across, the SMART acronym, the specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And it never stuck with me. I just found it too business-like, too high performance. So I started calling goals plans instead. And, how to start, just make a plan, get your sheet of paper, make a plan, whatever that may be. Sources of plans could be what brings you joy, as Mike was saying, some painful lessons, that can be a source of, to make change, or even challenges and problems that you've faced, that can be a source of, growth, because you're transforming, an obstacle, a challenge, into an opportunity for yourself. Because, but 4 years ago, I did an exercise. It's called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise. It's not the grounding one that we usually heard of in anxiety, but it's for like goal setting or plan setting. So what would you like to achieve 5 years from now, 4 months from now, 3 weeks from now, 2 days from now, and what do you want to do in 1 hour? So it's like what you all said, start small with, what do you want to plan? How do you want to plan your hour for the next hour, and how you do it? And that kind of builds your motivation. Starting, get your plan going, getting that sense of achievement for completing that plan, and build the momentum that way. Thanks, Cillian.
That's great, Thomas. I hadn't heard of that one before. It's one that'll be taken away anyway, for sure. So thanks for sharing. Hopefully people watching as well will take that on board as well. So thanks a million. Are we happy to move on, or anyone? Yeah. So we kind of touched on a little bit some of the challenges in setting goals. So the question is, what are some challenges in setting goals during mental health recovery?
I'll go first again.
Go for it, Thomas. Thank you.
You know, even in our APU workshops, we always, like, for example, the personal recovery goals, we talk about barriers, and the common themes that come up are motivation, time, energy, money, mood. And then we come up with an action plan on how to counteract each of these points. So it's basically, you know, in the workshop, you know, you're sharing the barrier, but you're also getting feedback from other people on how best to overcome that barrier. I'm going to share, you know, part of my own story. Like, for example, I was suffering from very low mood. So I kind of made a plan, okay, what's going to give me the joy to lift my mood? So I made a list of activities that I enjoy, and I started doing one of them, and it was dancing. And this was a few years ago. And then through the dancing, I discovered that I liked certain types of dancing. And then I went to Zumba and I injured myself, and that kind of put the car wash on the dancing bit for a while. But I noticed that, you know, I enjoyed the singing, so I decided to join this a choir in Ennis. And it's just, you know, from that problem, you know, I've gone off topic. You know, I had the barrier of the low mood. I created the problem, and it's just grown from that. So does that make sense? Yeah.
What you're saying, you kind of had the setback from the dance. You kind of tried something else, and then that kind of
just
working out well, you know.
You know, yeah, I know, you know, the barriers that we face from achieving our goals could be low mood, and that could be the challenge or the plan itself. And yeah,
just creating an action plan, kind of what you're mentioning around that to kind of help the situation. So yeah, that's great. Any thoughts on that, Mike or Sarah? Yeah, or Sarah, will I go to yourself or Mike? Yeah, sorry, either one.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I was just really interesting listening to Thomas about that, and I suppose it just struck me that, you know, the goals actually, you know, that we can write things down, and which I'm a great advocate for, just getting them down and seeing what they look like, and then we have an opportunity then to kind of say, well, actually, is that one really important to me? The other one there, number 2, I think is more important, and it kind of help us to kind of, you know, prioritize what we value most, or what we think will help us the most. But also, I suppose, what Thomas is saying, it just struck me that goals can change, and what my goal might have been a few months ago, that's, you know, that recovery isn't linear, and there can be different reasons why we kind of change tact. So like you were saying, Thomas, there could be an injury along the way, and, you know, you lose your dancing feet for a while, and you think, actually, maybe there is something else I like in the singing. And I suppose what struck me about what you were saying is that it's kind of that self looking inward, isn't it? And kind of bringing that awareness to yourself, in terms of, you know, where do I get enjoyment? What makes me feel good about myself? And I think when we identify things that will, you know, help us to feel better, and that are aligned with being healthy, you know, focusing on ourselves, focusing on our own well-being, be it physical health or mental health, usually for the most part it's what we find most motivating. We're more likely to stick with it then, aren't we? Because we are enjoying it and we can see potentially the benefits of it. Sometimes I know for me, if it's something like, oh, I need to do more exercise, or I need to get walking more, or doing something that's kind of aligned with my own health, physical health or mental health. And sometimes for me it's visualizing, you know, what the end goal might look like, and that kind of drives me forward a little bit then as well. So it's not always an immediate feeling of enjoyment, but I can think, well, actually, you know, if I visualize, you know, how I might feel if I do certain things, or whatever it might be that I'm interested in doing, for whatever reason, it kind of helps to keep me motivated and helps to keep me on track. But look, we all fall off track sometimes along the way, and yeah, I think that's where I think somebody had also mentioned about, you know, being accountable, you know, getting support from other people, and maybe that aligns with being accountable to what we've identified our goals as well, and not losing track of them, and kind of just checking back in with ourselves to go, oh, look, I had made a commitment to myself to do this every week, or to stay on track with something, and it's sometimes for me, if I share it with somebody else, it kind of helps me to be accountable for myself, what I'm doing, and staying aligned with it and kind of committing to it a bit more. I don't know if that resonates with anybody else in the panel. Yeah, it's just a few thoughts that came up.
Yeah, brilliant,
Yeah.
Sarah. I know Mike wanted to come in, or Gina, work away if you want to come in there.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank no,
no bother.
just I'm empathizing big time there with you, Sarah, because I know like what I've noticed, I suppose, lately is that the more and more I focus on doing the things that I suppose bring me joy and are, I suppose that I'm passionate about, the more I'm coming into contact with like-minded people who are driving me along and inspiring me further. And like that's just great. Like, especially when you can, maybe draw upon a time in your life where you didn't maybe have that, or where you didn't feel that you were maybe so aligned with your passions or with other people who were like-minded. So I don't ever take that for granted, and I would definitely share that with others, that that you might maybe lose some people along the way, the more you go for your goals, but you'll kind of gain more of the right people that will be encouraging you and motivating you along the way as well. And I wanted to share maybe another potential kind of challenge or that as well. And I suppose the answer to this for me is humor. So the problem then is time, isn't it? Like, so time, we never have time. But if you think about, okay, so like, do I have a goal of cleaning my blinds and cleaning the dust off the blinds and finding a way to do that? Gosh, okay, would I find time for that? Or would I find time to go and collect the lotto winnings? So I'd find loads of time to be able to go and collect the lotto winnings, but maybe I wouldn't find the time to clean the blinds, isn't it? Like, so, and that material is not mine. That was off I think of a TED talk or that. But like there's great videos around like, time and how to prioritize things so that you have the time to do the things that you want. But I think that's the key, is prioritize, and like, so the goals that we have, really, they must be priorities for us, and therefore they have to be aligned with what we want in life as well.
Great way to put it, Gina. I really like that. Thomas, you were going to come in there.
I've just forgotten what. No, like we did our self-care series a few weeks ago, and one of the things that came from that workshop was that we had so many goals, as Gina was saying, and the psychology of choice is quite interesting, and that's a webinar in its own right. But yeah, it's just, it's whatever your priority in life is, yourself, then your romance, then your family, then your career, and then your hobbies. It's, sometimes our mind, chooses the wrong thing, but, like as you said, clean the blinds or go and collect the lotto winnings, it's you have to make that choice, that discernment on what are you going to focus on, because we've only got so much energy, so much time, and even money. As we mentioned, money can be a barrier for some people as well. It's just making those educated choices, and that comes from our co-produced definition of recovery in the Midwest, making educated choices about our own lives with the support of others. Thanks, Cillian.
Lovely. Thanks a million, Thomas. Mike, did you want to come in as well?
Yeah, I'll come in there, and I said I'm going to follow on from Gina and saying humor, because if I went home today and I said, there's big changes coming, I have 5 new recovery goals, there's no one interested in what my goals are. They're only interested in what implications they are for them as a consequences of me implementing change. And I think, and to look at then in the serious way, you actually may lose people along the way. Because you find out who your friends are, who is there to support you. And I suppose to come back to when we're looking at what are challenges in setting goals, one of the big challenges or a barrier to setting goals is stigma. Because in the same way we can experience stigma, we say internally, I'm useless, I'm not worth it, I can't do. But sometimes it requires somebody else, like as I gave an example of, right? Somebody else may say, well, here's your strengths, but you can also experience stigma in a family. Whereas somebody could be saying to another person who is very unwell, you're useless, look at you. You know, where they're not able to actually see that this person is unwell, but they're only looking at it from, you're not meeting my needs, you're not fit, get a job, you know, you're bringing nothing to the table, and all of that sort of stuff. So you can, you know, whereas, because normally people think in terms of stigma is external. It's like when I'm going for a job, someone says, why is there a gap in your CV? And it's always something outside that stops us from doing things. But when we have our own stigma and you have family stigma, you know, or with your close friends, to me, that's far worse. You know, so, and it is a massive barrier to overcome, and to overcome our own stigma first. You know, and again, just on the hours, and I'm delighted you mentioned about, like, I could find time to go up and pick up the lotto, because it's a thing I drop this in every now and again at a team meeting. In a week, there's 168 hours. If someone has a job and they're doing 40 hours work a week, as an example, so you're sleeping 56 hours, you have 40 hours at work, you're left with 74 hours. So what are you doing with your 74 hours when you're not in work and not sleeping? That's a lot of hours, you know, whereas it comes back to exactly where I can't find the time, or I can't make the time, and the motivation. Where sometimes I know myself, I genuinely, when I would have been unwell, I hadn't the energy or the motivation or the will. And even when I started doing things to help myself, I would have found I'm still not getting any benefit. You know, I'm doing my absolute best. I'm taking all the medication. I'm keeping all my appointments. I'm going to the counselling. I'm walking the legs off myself. I'm doing everything right. And I'm still in the pits and the fits of it. But I never gave up, and I kept going. And because I think and as I said earlier, going right back to when I got a diagnosis first, because to me, the communication it implied I could get better, but that was such a hard job. Right now, I'm still in management, you know, and I have bad days, black days, but it's just that it is hard work. So all I'm saying is, if you stick with it, you will eventually start to feel, as Gina mentioned there, oh, actually, that was a moment of joy, you know, if you have the absence of joy. And it could be looking at just the sunset, the sun coming up, you know, a flower, a butterfly, children laughing, or the sound of And I said, like, and there's one thing I love the sound of. And I think, and it takes me right back to childhood and grounds me, that when children go out into a playground and they're on a break, because when we talk about change and the world has gone mad and is moving in all directions, and I could be walking down the road, or you hear it in the distance, the sound of children in the playground, it's exactly the same as it was when I was in that playground. And it's just something that grounds me in that, and it just takes me back, that little kind of, you know, yeah, it's just something say, yeah, so with everything gone mad and all the things happening, yeah, some things are constant, you know. Anyway, I'm rambling. Thanks, Cillian.
Oh, it's all good, Mike. It's the simple things in life I got from that as well. So that's really, really good. Anyone want to come in there on Mike's thoughts or anything you want to add? Or are we happy? Sarah, you were on the
Yeah,
other
I suppose it just resonated with me what Mike was saying, and I suppose, you know, sometimes it is finding enjoyment in the simplest of things, and goals can sound, and you know, even the word goal sounds really hopeful and aspirational, which is amazing. But it can also bring with that, you know, this sense of, well, what could my goals be? Sure, you know, what have I got at the moment, or you know, what could I possibly achieve? And that's something that people often, I suppose, confide in and say in some of the workshops here in the APU, or to me when in our conversations. And I think it's just, you know, kind of reminding ourselves that it doesn't have to be this enormous, huge change, that sometimes it's about the small things and the little things But it's like Mike was saying, it's being consistent then, and it's, to keep on doing it even in the midst of, well, is this really making any difference, and trying to find the willpower, or digging deeper to think, well, what is the point of doing this, and trying to find a reason to continue chipping away at whatever it is that your goal is. But for the most part, I've yet to meet someone say, well, when I kept doing the little things, they do kind of impact the next thing, and then there is that ripple effect that the panel referenced earlier. So yeah, I just think that what Mike was saying, being consistent and kind of doing it for yourself, keep plowing away at it for yourself, and over time, you will feel or see the difference for yourself. But I know that in the moment that can be very tricky. That can be really hard.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. And Thomas, you want to?
Yeah, can I just add
go
on?
ahead,
What you said, Sarah, goals can be hopeful and everything, but sometimes it can be like when I do my goals, my plan setting for the year, I do my circle and the spider graph or whatever it is, and I write down this quote, and I just picked it up here. What you get by achieving your goals is not as important as who you become by achieving your goals. So it's not the goal itself, it's the person that you become. So, using your strengths, identifying weaknesses, making new reflections. For example, if you want to run 5K, it's not the 5K, even though you get a sense of achievement, but from going from that person to running to 5K, you could have developed lots of new skills, lots of strengths, and even personality traits as well, and just, learned more about yourself in that process. So, I know we're focused on recovery goals, but, it is a process. Does that make sense? Yeah,
absolutely, Thomas. That's great, and it always kind of reminds you of the saying, like, the journey is the reward. Like, it's great to get to the goals or achieve certain goals, but it's like you said, what's the process, what you become during that time, and what you take on, all the strengths you're learning, and everything else. So that's great. Thanks for that. And Sarah, what you were kind of saying ties nicely into our next question as well. So I'll go to that if that's okay. And so the question is, what can I do if I'm struggling to reach my goal, and how can I cope with setbacks along the way? So we've kind of touched on a little bit. So if you can maybe fine tune this question onto maybe one or two things.
Yeah,
Mike, go for it.
I'll just pop in there, Cillian, and simply is because one of the problems is it comes back to linking it to the self-stigma, is we beat ourselves up. So, and I'm trying harder to kind of say, well, if it's not happening today, a bit of self-compassion, that's okay. Go again tomorrow, and that'll be fine. And keep it as simple. So, like, what's the simple fix here? Or the setbacks? Well, you just hit the pause button. It doesn't undo what's been done. It's just a pause or a break. Get your resources together to go again. Because if you can't fix something, as I always say, go around it.
Great, thanks, Mike. Gina, Sarah, Thomas.
Yeah, I love that, Mike, around the self-compassion, and that's like, I suppose, look, for years I hear people talking about self-compassion. Asher, what does that really mean? But it's only after really sinking in for me over the last few years, 2 years, I'd say, really, and again over a process of personal development and getting support around healing from different things. And what really helped me to get into that space was kind of creativity and art, and just like visualizing I suppose inner child work, and that, like, and like trying to say to myself, like, well, actually you're being compassionate, like you'd be compassionate to a stranger, why can't you be compassionate to yourself, like, and try and bring that same level of compassion. And now I'm able to bring humor into it, because if I see, or if I hear my inner critic kind of jumping in too quick, I'll say, now, come on, look at, we're doing our best here now. There's no need to beat me. And, and sometimes I say, at least take the nails out of the stick, because like, sometimes, like, depending on, I suppose, look, what we're used to doing, your default might be to jump in and beat yourself up. But for me, it has, if I just try and bring in the sense of humor, like, and say, okay, there you go now, but look, take out the nails first of all, like, we didn't do too bad, like, we did our best. And just maybe something else that helped me last year was a colleague in Mental Health Ireland, Kim. She did a lovely start to the year with us. She did a mandala. So, and she got us to just really tune in again to creativity and just to kind of put a lot of images on the page of what we wanted, I suppose, maybe to get from the year, maybe not so much as what to achieve, but maybe just what we wanted to get from the year. So I really brought myself into that whole thing, and I developed like a mantra for the year, and the mantra was to simplify things in order to create moments of joy. And I achieved it, and I stuck it up on the wall, and it really helped me, because I suppose instead of kind of doing, I kind of gave myself the mantra of, no, we're simplifying. This year we're simplifying. And in that, we're going to create more opportunities for joy. And maybe to throw in one more little thing onto it, the wheel of life sometimes is just a great, tool. If somebody said, oh, like, is there a tool that would help me? It's just that circle divided into 8 pieces. Name all the areas of importance in your life, and then you rate them and say, well, what one thing could I do to be a little bit more happy with that area of my life? So, again, it's about the smaller, kind of shorter term goals leading to the bigger goals.
Brilliant, Gina. There was a lot in that, so thanks a million for sharing. Thomas, you were coming in there.
Yeah, I think it's just, setbacks are going to happen. Most of the time, setbacks are going to happen, and like Mike and Gina were saying, that practicing self-compassion can really help. But I heard a quote from a psychologist, and I can't remember exactly, but sometimes compassion is all well and good, but sometimes you have to be honest with yourself. Like, for example, at Christmas, I ate a lot of selection boxes, the tubs of sweets, and it's just like, I can be compassionate with myself, or I can be realistic. You did it. You did it. You took personal responsibility. You knew you did it. But that's it, and I have to deal with the setback from that. So, yeah. And also, as I mentioned before, setbacks can be, an opportunity for, a new plan or a new goal or a new direction that you want to take. Yeah, or just learning from each other, coming to Midwest ARIES workshops, we discuss barriers to certain things, hearing what other people have, done to overcome them, or even hearing the recovery stories from the Recovery College or other websites or blogs, that sort of thing. So thanks, Cillian.
Great, thanks, Thomas. I'm just going to pause for a second for the attendees. If you have any questions, we have about 10 minutes left. If you want to just start putting them into the Q&A, we'd be happy to answer them towards the latter end of the webinar. Are we happy enough to move on to the next piece, the next question? That'd be all right with everyone, yeah? So the question is, how important is support in helping to achieve goals? Again, we've kind of touched on a little bit, but if anyone wants to come in there.
Yeah. I'll just pop in there, Cillian, and I'll give you a real live example. And it was about 5 years ago. I was delivering a workshop in the local community centre. And we were talking about looking at strengths and enjoyment and stuff that we can do that can enhance and improve our mental health. One man sitting there says, well, you know what I love to do? He said, I love going for a walk with the dog. I think I'm out in nature, really enjoying it. The dog is a great companion, and that's what I like to do. And there was a guy sitting next to him, and he says, but yet, you know what? He says, I love walking my dog too, he says. What time are you going walking tomorrow? We'll meet up. And so a friendship through, so when you look about the importance of that, so if you can find someone in a like-minded way with a similar interest, and it was as simple as that. But there was 2 people, but the key to it is when you find somebody else, there's a commitment there, because tomorrow morning, either one of those could have woke up and says, I won't bother, just looking a bit miserable, and right, sure, here, throw the dog out the door, out the back, but the fact then you have the commitment. So that's the support piece, and it might sound simple, but when you make a commitment to meet somebody, to do something in a shared interest that you enjoy, you'll commit, you'll do it, and it's, I think it was just, I loved it, and it just, stuck in my head, but I suppose and it's like I was saying, mental health, there's a spectrum. Whereas part of the human condition, there's ups and downs, and we all have off days and kind of bad days, and then you have people who are very unwell. So I suppose that's a simple thing when you're looking at, the lower end of maintenance, but sometimes the support in achieving your goal. That's why in the hospital and in the day hospitals or community mental health teams, like there's a range of clinicians there to help, who may help you with different needs. And that could be a social worker, an occupational therapist. The benefits of medication, and is really important as well. Family and friends, because I remember the first psychiatrist I sat across from, and he said to me, "Here's the deal," he said. "I'm going to give you medication and I'm going to make you feel better. You know your problems. Can't do anything for them. You need to figure out them." So, but while it might sound harsh, but it's actually absolute clarity. So again, when you look at things, but as part of that support from the team, then, as part of that care planning process within the team, that other needs can be met. So there's extremes when it comes to mental health and well-being. Well, I suppose there's a spectrum. As I always say, like in Ireland, we have the QQI, and if you ever saw that thing with all the thing that goes up around like that, and you have all like half a pie chart, and so you can go right across this QQI. But it's the same in mental health and mental illness. You have a whole spectrum, and the goal is, I suppose, whereas on QQI you're trying to dial it up, but in mental health you're trying to dial it down. Thanks, Cillian.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. Does anyone want to come in on the support question? Sarah, Thomas, Gina, you're unmuted yet? Or Sarah, yeah, work away.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think, I couldn't agree with Mike anymore. I think there is that piece around, getting support and asking for support is actually okay. And it's a sign of, it's a sign of strength, I feel, because, none of us can do it all on our own. And we all need help and support at different stages in our life. And, whether it's professional support that we're getting or support from, somebody else in our life, be it, if it's through in education, or maybe it's support from a friendship, or, whatever that might be, I think it's intrinsic, support is intrinsic to change, and it's definitely something that I think all of us need at different times in achieving any goal that we have. But ultimately, like Mike was saying, it absolutely comes back to ourselves, in terms of asking for it and also actioning the support. So we might get the good advice, and we might get, we have the plan down on paper, and then it's actually, putting it into action. And, support can look very different for lots of different people. So support might be, somebody sitting with somebody for a while, so that they might want to come into the ARIES workshop here in the hospital, and it might be actually sitting with that person, not really having much conversation, but just sitting with them so that they feel comfortable in the space, so that they feel able to sit and hear the voices of others and just be around other people. And that might be the goal for the day. But support is just vital, I think, in setting goals, not only setting them, but in actually putting them into, actioning them, and doing what we need to do in working towards achieving them. It's so important. And I suppose, yeah, on a personal level for me, I think, I don't know if anybody else relates to this, but definitely I'm the worst for saying I should have done this, or I could have done that, or maybe I could have. And I'm looking back all the time, and I need to kind of, stay focused on, looking forward, and look, I've done the best I could at the time, but that's over now. And what can I learn from it? What do I need to change? What can I take forward with me? And, how will I do it differently now next time? Or like, like the panel have been saying, it is a journey, and it is a process. So, we may not have received the support before, but, we can circle back on that. We can take that advice forward another time. Yeah. Thanks.
Lovely. Thanks, Sarah. We have one final question. Are we happy enough to move on? Or Gina, do you want to come in and this?
I was going to add in quickly, sorry. Just you know, I suppose the idea of support comes in on under connectedness, like, you know, on around, I suppose, CHIME and the 5 Ways to Wellbeing, 2 pieces of research that will both bring out connectedness and the importance of connections as really important both to our recovery and to our general mental health and wellbeing. Like, so I suppose, you know, all those people who were interviewed and brought forward, that can't be wrong. So like, we are social creatures, but sometimes I suppose we can, you know, isolate or that, like, especially if we're going through something, you know, and it can be depending, I suppose, on our default. Like, you know, for me, I know it can be a default that I will kind of pull back, like, you know, if I'm not feeling great, you know, so and that's okay. We can allow ourselves, you know, that little bit of time, and it's a protective thing. But then I suppose to try and encourage ourselves then to reach out, and as was already said, it's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a huge strength if you can really avail of what's there. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Gina. Just to cover the final question, and if we can keep this brief as well, because we're running towards the end of the webinar as well. So the question is, what one piece of advice would you give to someone who has a goal in mind and hesitant to start? So if you keep it brief, Mike, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I'll jump in first. It was a quote, and again, I will be brief. My granddad, again, short story. Everybody, when I was younger, everybody used to go to her house on Sunday afternoon, and all the extended family. So she was the matriarch of the family. And I asked her one day, and I said, why do we do this? Why do people come here on Sunday? And she says, well, it's like this, she says. We're all herd animals. We're part of a herd. And to function properly, we need to be together. That's it.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thanks, Mike. Sarah, Gina, Thomas?
Yeah,
yeah, work away.
I would give, well, I got this from a TED Talk, a 2010 TED Talk, and he said, Derek Sivers says, keep your goals to yourself, don't tell anybody, because once you tell someone your goals, you get a good feeling, and it kind of tricks you into feeling that it's accomplished, so you're less motivated to do it. And psychologists have looked into it, it's called social reality. So that's my one piece of advice. Have your goal or plan and don't tell anybody about it.
Solid.
Tell them afterwards.
That's great. That's brilliant. Thanks, Thomas. Gina or Sarah, any final words?
Okay, a quote then. I suppose the difference between a dream and a goal is a plan. So get the piece of paper and trust yourself. Just write it down. Yeah.
Lovely. Thanks, Gina. And Sarah?
Yeah, I suppose echo everyone is saying, but I think it's to believe in yourself. And you know, just take that chance, take that first step. And yeah, just make a start, whatever that start looks like, just make a start. And you know, get the help, ask somebody to help you to give you that support so that you can make that start as well, is really important.
Excellent. Thank you very much to all the panel. I've just put in the feedback form, and Mike has put it in as well, just for people to fill in on your just experience of the webinar. It just helps us going forward to just improve the webinar series. So what I'm going to do now is just share a couple of slides on our upcoming events. So give me 2 seconds and I get it up. So this is February's online workshop timetable. So we've a range of workshops. So we have one tomorrow, actually. It's called Self-Care, Building My Resilience. And then next week, Family Recovery and Mental Health. How can I find meaning in my life and feel more empowered? And then we have the anxiety series towards the end of February as well. So all of our workshops can be booked on Eventbrite. So it's midwestaries.eventbrite.ie. So all our face-to-face and online workshops can be booked there. So I'm going to run through some face-to-face workshops. So if you are out in the community and you're interested in attending, we have workshops, the anxiety series and Shannon Family Resource Centre. So again, this can be booked through the Shannon FRC website. You will get this slides as well in the learner pack that will be sent out as well. So if you do want to come along to the workshops, all the booking links will be on the posters attached. Then we have in Thurles, the Source Library, we have Creativity for Wellbeing and Journaling in the middle of more or less near the end of February. So that's booked on Eventbrite as well. Then we have the Creativity for Wellbeing. This is in Fine's library. So that's the 13th of March. And then we have Nina Library, then Exploring Anxiety and Managing Anxiety. And that can be booked. Both those workshops can be booked on Eventbrite. Then we have more workshops face-to-face in Ross Cray Library. So this again can be booked on Eventbrite. So it's the anxiety series again. And then for the Fine's Library again, it's in April. So this is a partnership with Fine's Library, and it's part of Lifelong Learning Festival as well, 2024. So that's a partnership there. And then the final face-to-face from April, we've scheduled well in advance, is the 18th of April, and it's the Journaling for Wellbeing workshop. Our next webinar then is Can Journaling Help Mental Health? And that is on February 28th. So it's always the last Wednesday of the month for our webinar as well, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. So if you want to join that, it is on Eventbrite as well. So the next thing is where this recording will be. It'll be on our YouTube channel, and you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram as well, and subscribe on YouTube. And it'll be a podcast on the Wellness Panel, and that's available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all good podcasting services. So Gina, if you want to pop in your email or even want to call it out, you're more than welcome to come in there. Yeah, this is
I just popped it in there, so it's in the chat. Hopefully people can see it. So Gina, Gina at mentalhealthireland.ie. And we've loads of different resources, but I did pop in there the link to the Creativity for Wellbeing workbook, because that had loads of different coaching tools that people might find helpful on this topic.
Super, thanks a million, Gina, that's much appreciated. So I'm just going to stop the share here, and we are just after 3 o'clock. So I just want to thank the panelists. Hopefully all the attendees really enjoyed the conversation. I thought it was just great. I could sit back and just facilitate it, which is lovely. And hopefully you all enjoyed as well. So I'll just pass over if you just want to say a quick goodbye. Mike, Gina, Thomas, Sarah, if you want to say.
Great stuff. Thanks, Cillian, for facilitating the group today. Really enjoyed the chat. Hope people get some benefit from listening in, and our future listeners on YouTube as well. Thanks, Cillian.
Thanks a million, Mike. Anyone else want to say goodbye? Gina, Thomas,
Thank
Sarah?
you. I really enjoyed it. Hope everyone enjoyed it too. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, really inspired by everyone's input today. Really lovely experience. Thanks a million.
Yeah, and thank you very much, everybody, for sharing here today, and look forward to the future. And I really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Lovely. Thanks a million. We'll say our goodbye. So we'll see you again at the next webinar. Thanks a million, everyone.